Wow. Well, my name is Rebecca Carlton, and thank you for many of you returning over and over and over and over again. There's new faces as well. I am the artist who's created the piece, Are We Listening? It's an art installation as well as a social sculpture. For me, the piece I feel very proud of and very excited about, but the bigger piece is Are We Listening? And how does that bring community together? How do we communicate with one another? How do we listen? It's not just listening, but it's also sharing your ideas and your perspective and who you are. And I said this to someone the other day, and they really were taken aback. I said, if you've only listened to someone, they have stolen from you because you have not then in return shared your voice with them. And the person looked at me and was like, oh, what? And I said, it's thievery, because in our world, there's a conversation and there's an exchange of ideas. And if we really don't have that exchange of ideas, we're in isolation. So, my piece here is about world languages. Are we listening? There's 6,910 spoken languages in the world. That took me by surprise when I learned that, and I created this piece based on 10% of the world languages. So the homing pigeon is used. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. If you want to know more, my statement is over on the wall. But it really does have to do with acknowledging diversity, inclusion, history, cultural identity, the land, what happens when a language is lost. Our identity slowly disappears. And so tonight I am so honored that Cathy agreed to have the conversation with all of you to be involved this evening, because you're such an important part of not only the Door County community, but of the rest of our world. And so it's important to hear from all of you, and then to hear what all of you think too, and your ideas. I'm going to spend a minute with my little piece of paper that I wrote. So, welcome to Are We Listening? Pride, Diversity, Inclusion for the evening conversation. In celebration of Pride Month, the evening panel conversation will feature leaders and members of the LGBTQ+ community, including valued allies. We welcome an honest discussion on the ways in which Door County has grown in diversity and inclusion. We will also thoughtfully express our shared realities on how we are being seen, heard, and listened to. We hope you will join us for this insightful conversation. Questions and comments, of course, are welcome. The panel conversation will be moderated by Cathy Grier, who is a songwriter deeply committed to advocacy and civil rights and is the chair-founder of Open Door Pride. The accomplished panel members are Owen Alabado, founder and current president of Northern Door Pride and a 4-year Door County resident, formerly from Los Angeles. Sandy Brown is also a dedicated advocate and founder and leader of PFLAG of Door County since 1995. I want to make another comment about Sandy that she did not include in her biographical information to me, that she has been a driving force, really the roots and seed for Door County in the LGBTQ+ community. And Open Door Pride acknowledged her in creating an award that's awarded to community members every year for their advocacy. And it's in name of Sandy. So I think that's important for people to know. James Champion is a member of the National Association of Social Workers, the National Organization for Human Services, and works for We Are Hope, Inc. Andrea Frank is also a board member for Open Pride and a late-to-life lesbian. I wasn't going to give more information. Amy Conley is a compassionate executive director of United Way of Door County with the intention of making meaningful contributions to our community. Mike McCarthy is a father first, a community member, a taxpayer, a cancer survivor, a business owner, lover of life, lifelong learner, and devoter. And Jared Santak has championed also many community organizations. He is the founding and artistic director for Right on Door County and is a member of the Sturgeon Bay Local Arts Board. He's also been very active in Open Door Pride. And so thank you to all of you for your work for our community. I'm going to turn it over to Cathy now.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, thank you all for being here. And what a panel we have. To have a county that has the vibrancy of these individuals is so important. We are here to welcome an honest discussion on how Door County has grown in diversity and inclusivity for the LGBTQ community, and the intention of the roundtable is to thoughtfully express our shared realities, which is, something that Rebecca mentioned, and I think it's worth saying is if we're listening, we find our shared realities. If we're not listening, we put up walls. What we do know is that our county is experiencing a shift, and it's been positive, but there's also been reticence. And we've seen it in the recent county supervisor's flagpole policy, which was solely created to avoid raising a pride flag in June. But we also had the city of Sturgeon Bay, the village of Sister Bay, and Bailey's Harbor all proclaiming June as Pride Month. So we're getting there. We just have to choose where we shift when there's pushback. And so before you are these amazing members of the LGBTQ community and allies. And I'd like us to have a discussion on why words like inclusivity, diversity, and equity have suddenly become redefined or seen as taking something away from somebody else. So what we're asking the community at large to accept when we display a pride flag, when it's also Dairy Month. We can have, multiple celebrations, when we're asked to address someone with a they/them pronoun. That's a shift for us. So there's a shift tonight, and through our discussion, we hope it's enlightening, and we do have some time left at the end, and I know I can see in the audience there are some pretty great people out there that will look forward to hearing some conversation. So I just want to start the conversation. We've got 2 microphones there, and I'm going to share my microphone here. Everyone kind of put in some questions, and I've been to a couple of these panels, and what I asked the members to do is to select a question from a cup. I cut the questions out, and just I'm going to start with Owen, and if the question matters to you or come up with something else, just share your experience, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. The question that I received is why it's important to recognize diversity of ability and how someone's abilities can change at any time during their life. I think within a small community like Door County, I originally am from Wisconsin. I'm actually not from LA, but I lived in LA for 17 years. And when you have such a large city to pull from when it comes to talent in any sort of aspect, whether it be nonprofit work or singing, arts, whatever, even just a business, where people's strengths lie and their abilities. And what I love about Door County is finding out what people's passion and their abilities are, and then playing to the strengths of those abilities when you're doing work in the DEI world. I'm one, if you know me at all, I wear many, many hats. And I love cultivating other people's abilities through my experience, whether it be filmmaking, editing, choreography, improv, stand-up comedy, all the stuff I do up here. And so I think it is so important to recognize. I think also sometimes in life we see other people succeed or do things that we want to do, and then the gaslighting happens, or where I've seen it in the community where sometimes they're like, I would do it this way, or I've always wanted to do that. And what we foster, especially at Northern Door Pride, because our mission statement is to create a space for everyone to be the best versions of themselves, is to always bring people up and never compete, and never, we want everyone to be great at what they do. And so, yeah, I mean, and as we get older, like, I'm 44, and I'm finding out, like, there's things that I wanted to always do. And now I don't live in LA, and I'm not in a rat race, and I'm not in a car for 4 hours a day going to 5 auditions and doing all these things, where now I can actually find these abilities that I never got to do. And I love that Door County gives us the space to do it. So within the DEI world, I think I'm finding, especially, Cathy and I talk about this a lot, about, like, resources of people, volunteers or board members and all that jazz. And just, I will recognize that, hey, this person is really good at this, but I know they cannot really commit to doing other stuff. And so it's just like almost putting a puzzle piece in when it comes to abilities and what they're willing to do, because we're all very busy, especially, when most of us up in Northern Door County are in the hospitality industry. So we're like, either working at restaurants or working with tourists every day, and we get burnt out and all that stuff. So it's all about balance and all about finding everyone's strengths and when and where to ask.
Thank you. So there are some microphones there, and I just want to suggest if someone has a comment there about what Owen was saying, want to join in on that and add to it?
Sure.
You have to have a switch on there, and then we'll get it.
Sorry about that. So one thing that I wanted to mention is we live in a community that has a very diverse population when it comes to not only who we are, but also how old we are. In fact, per capita, we do lean to be a little bit higher on the per capita age range. And so sometimes abilities can change where we can sometimes lose abilities. And part of that is once again, as Owen said, to play to the strengths. Take that strengths-based approach and make sure that, maybe I won't be able to do this one thing, but I can certainly do this other thing.
Anyone else want to add in on that? Amy, how do you feel with the United Way and your experience there?
I think, there we go. I think it really depends where people are at in their life. We're really fortunate here that a lot of people choose to retire to this community. I'm looking at that couple right there. But they're a great example of people who, wherever they were before they came to Door County, they were involved in something. They were a little passionate about something. But then once they come here with over 300 nonprofits in our community, they're really able to take their skills and use those skills. And if their ability changes as they age, so I've been with United Way for almost 25 years, so I've watched a lot of our volunteers that I inherited, as I say, age over these 25 years. And, they get to the point where we have to sometimes change their involvement. They still want to be an active part of our organization, but maybe they can't do what they've always done. So being able to adapt to their abilities and their skill set in that moment, I think is really important. But, I think that, Mike, I'm just going to call you out, okay? You were probably an amazing board member when you were working, but you were working, and you gave a little bit of time to the boards that you could. But now let's face it, you're probably working 60 hours a week as a volunteer. Beth, yes, okay. And using your skills, right? Using those finance skills, but also then using other skills, your music, you've been able to embrace that probably more. So I think that's what's unique about our community is over 300 nonprofit volunteer opportunities where people can use all kinds of different skills.
Fantastic. Sandy, you have a question there?
So this is a good question for you all too, when we get to that point in the conversation. How comfortable do you feel being out in Door County? I've been around a long time, and I'm in a lot of committees that I have been accepted in, so I feel very comfortable. I think I'm pretty known. It's always hard to know how far out you are or who you reach, but I'm interested in hearing from the other panelists as well.
Why don't you pass the mic down and we'll just ask everyone? Yeah. Owen, you want to start?
Oh, sure. I feel for the most part, I feel very comfortable because I'm usually in settings where I'm not in a threatening situation. But being a public figure and my face blasted on so many different things, I have felt uncomfortable just because I've told this to the Pauls before. Like, I feel like I'm public enemy number one up in Northern Door County for all of the racist, homophobic, Trumpy haters. And so, I mean, I've definitely, especially with recent things, with having to hire a lawyer to send someone a cease and desist letter, and it's, so I will be cognizant of the surrounding at times, where I'm kind of looking over my shoulder or just knowing that, you never know. And like last night was our Pride event, and it had a very successful, nothing happened, no one came and threatened us or anything like that, which was great, because we were worried about that as a board. We were very worried. But yeah, I mean, I know that I'm not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Being in LA, you didn't really have to worry about that because it was so diverse. And I will notice in the off season too, especially when there's no tourists here, that I will walk into a bar or a restaurant and I will literally be the only one with black hair and the only one a person of color. And that's already like on my mind immediately. Like, and none of my friends, like, how do you, like, I will clock it within 2 seconds. And not only that, then I'll be like, oh, I'm also gay. And everybody knows it. So it's just, I don't know. But I've only been called a slur once, and I had something happened to me at Husby's once in the 4 years, and then someone racist called me like a Mexican thing, and I'm not even Mexican. But yeah, that's about it. So yeah, that's about it.
James?
Thank you very much for sharing, Owen. I personally, having spent the majority of my life in the county growing up, there was a little bit of fear initially when I came out, and there's always going to be that little bit of fear living in a rural community. You know your neighbors, but you don't know what anybody's necessarily capable of when they're experiencing heightened emotions. But I do have to say that when I came out, I decided I wasn't going to worry about any of that. It was the one hill that I was literally going to die on, if it came down to it. That's about all I have to say about it right now.
For me, I've lived here for 14 years, and I came out 5 years ago, and I had a very Pollyanna view on it, and it was like, this is me, this is who I am, take me or leave me. So I feel very comfortable at the community at large. My full-time job is I'm the Coca-Cola sales rep for all of Door and Kewaunee County, and I have quite a few customers that I didn't feel so comfortable leading with who I am as a person, just because it was business and I didn't know how it would affect that relationship. So in those instances, I still have some customers, well, I mean, now it's blasted all over the internet now, so I'm sure they all know. But I always, when I was talking about my partner or my relationships, I always used we or they or my spouse or my partner and non-gender terms. And then if they made an assumption on a gender, then that's when I would correct them. And they were then more embarrassed at that point that they made that mistake. And at first I felt bad for it. And then I thought, no, like we all as a whole need to stop making assumptions making assumptions that Owen is Mexican, whatever it is about each other, and get to know each other before we make those assumptions.
As an ally, I worry a lot. I see political signs, I hear things, I know how people think. We were sharing beforehand the joys and pains of social media, right? I'm still in touch with my high school friends thanks to social media, and some of the things they post, it's just so hateful. I worry. James, when you came out, I worried, but you knew I was there to support you. And, if you want to die on that hill, I'm going to die on that hill with you. But yeah, that's that piece that we want everybody to be comfortable, but we know there is a lot of hate out there still.
Yeah. So I have two kids. I have a daughter and a transgender son. And I couldn't be more proud of both of them. They're really wonderful people, and I'm not saying that just because they're my children. They are inquisitive, and they're in their early 20s, so they're a pain in the neck. And I feel for you guys from everybody, from their comments about not feeling safe. I mean, and I think about that for my own children as well. I have kind of a funny little thing because I decided this spring that I was going to display the pride flag on my business. And I didn't really think it was going to be a big deal. But a woman that comes every year to take care of some things, and I kind of considered her a friend of mine, I was excited because I built the flagpole and I had the pride flag up. It was up for like 2 days. And by the way, it's a Philadelphia pride flag. And speaking, Rebecca, of languages, I speak Philadelphia. So, because I'm from Philadelphia. But I enjoy the Philadelphia pride flag for all of the things that it represents. But what I thought was really kind of interesting, I don't think she really heard me. And she says, and she was angry, well, I don't want to know what what their sexual activity is. And that was my first kind of exposure here of things that I'm like, my God, it's about inclusion. It's not about somebody's sex. I don't want to hear about somebody's heterosexual sex life. But I mean, what people do in the privacy of their own home with whomever, it's none of my concern. So I feel for you, and I'm empathetic about it, and I am definitely worried about my son. But they are strong, and they're awesome. And the more that we have these kinds of discussions, and the more that, and let's face it, there's not a Trumper in this room. I kind of wish that there was. I wish we had a dissenting point of view. I'm not woke either, okay? So I think most of us all kind of fit somewhere in the middle, or slightly in that whole continuum. But I think we just have to keep on focusing on inclusion. Love is really hard to find, even our own selves, even loving ourselves. So the more that we get focused on inclusion, the more that we kind of forgive ourselves and get focused on being the genuine people that we are, I think it's really beneficial for everybody. Yeah. I can't wait for my question.
So do I feel comfortable here? Yes, I mean, that was a big consideration in, deciding to move here to get this organization started was, is this a place we could feel comfortable and feel safe? And we had been visiting here, and we felt it was a very welcoming, accepting community. We didn't feel anything, but what you feel on a 4 to 5 day vacation and what you feel in years of living are very different things. But by and large, we have, we do feel comfortable. My husband and I would not go walking down 3rd Avenue holding hands. But we also would not have gone walking down Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis, where we lived before, holding hands. Partly that's just who we are as people, but partly you just never know. And so we wouldn't do that. I would say though, if we did walk down 3rd Avenue holding hands, it's more likely to be in winter than it would be in summer, because I think we trust the people who live here more than we trust the people. We know the community that's here. We don't know the community that's visiting here, even though we were once those people. If that makes sense. So, yeah.
Well, that's really indicative of this kind of listening discussion, and I loved everyone's comments. I'll just, as moderator, I'm trying not to insert myself, but I will say that answering that question, I struggle with it. I can genuinely be in a room in front of politicians and know that I'm not necessarily going to win any points by saying that I'm gay. I actually am more comfortable calling myself a gay woman than a lesbian, because I know that when you say lesbian, it creates all sorts of identity things about, oh, she's so, strong and so scary, the idea that a lesbian is a little bit militant. So I soften it. I make that choice. I'm a lesbian, but I make that choice to say I'm a gay woman because I know it softens it when I'm talking to somebody. As a musician, and one that is known, I also don't walk in a room or a stage and say, hey, everybody, I'm a lesbian. So I know that heterosexuals don't do that either. But there's this thing that, as you brought up, Mike, just like, why does it have to be about sex? And when we say who we are, we're comfortable coming out. What we're trying to tell everybody is we're comfortable telling you all about our sexuality. And I think it's so much more deeper than that. So that's my comment on that. And I'd like to move the question on to James, the Scott one there.
Absolutely. So I have the question, would you be so reticent to display the pride flag if your son wasn't transgender? Personally, I'm going to say no, for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I identify as a queer person. Number two, as someone who uses he, they pronouns, I'm not all that unaccustomed to at least a shade of the trans experience. And I do believe that, we need to stay together in all of this. In order to be an ally to other queer people in general, you also have to be a trans ally. And, whether we want to be or not, we are kind of all lumped in together. And I mean, I personally don't mind, but we have a symbol that represents all of us, so it's best that we have a united front.
Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, perhaps as the only person here, the father of a trans son, perhaps that question was meant for me, I don't know, but so there's a lot of things, when you start, first off, it's just a flag. Honest to goodness, I don't think of it as really anything too terribly deep on the surface. But then when you start to think about the ramifications to your business, which, I rent rooms, so I interact with lots of people throughout the course of the summer. And I have a little pizza joint, so I interact with a lot of people. And having the flag out on my property early on was something that, as a family, we were kind of like, oh, yeah, should we do this, should we not? And so we put the flag basically on the house. And that didn't cut it for me. Because frankly, if my son is going to be courageous enough to embrace their identity and move forward in this world as a transgender son of mine, I am absolutely going to be carrying that flag for them. And I'm happy about it. And it doesn't make any difference to me at this point. But in the discernment of it, there's a lot of things that you've got to consider. And certainly we've just gotten quite a number of uncomfortable kinds of thoughts about safety, about how we interact with our communities. But again, for me, it gets right back to the inclusion. In dealing with all of these people, and I meet people every day, I'm absolutely no different than anyone in this room. I deal with people on a level. I make their beds, I clean their toilets. It's intimate in a weird kind of business transactional way. And they share things that perhaps they wouldn't with their plumber or whomever. And so I've become kind of this psychologist to a degree. And what I found is that absolutely every single person that I encounter is flawed, just like me. And so if I choose to fly the flag, damn right. It's just not, it's not going to be. This is, if this is where I put the stake in the ground, or if I die on the hill, I really don't care what other people have to say. If people come and they want to judge me because I fly a flag, by the way, the American flag is at the top of the flagpole, and then I have my pride flag. And for as crappy as this country has been over the years, with lots and lots of terrible, terrible things that we continue to do on a daily basis, it's still my country. And it's still something that I'm proud of, even though it's flawed, just like all of us. So I say bring it on. Let's fly that flag.
Anyone else want to weigh in on the flag question? I know it was about raising it for a particular member of a family, but a business or... go ahead. It is, okay. Well then, I'm just going to pass the question down to Andrea. Thank you, Andrea. That was perfect segue.
My question is, was there something from your past that sparked an interest in displaying the pride flag? I recently, last fall, started displaying the progress flag. And I did it for a multitude of reasons. One is that my spouse left me. I no longer wanted to be gay, I guess is kind of, long story short, due to religious reasons. And so it was kind of a protest of, screw you, I'm still gay. And I also have one neighbor in my neighborhood that was flying the Trump flag and women for Trump and all sorts of things. And I don't have much of a relationship with that neighbor. And so I wanted to say loud and proud of who I was and where I stand. So that is why I fly my progressive flag.
You want to mention just about your experience with the Flag Initiative in Door County and how that has in some ways changed, affected, positively, negatively? What are you hearing?
One of the things, like with the Pride Flag Initiative, that broke my heart is businesses that did not want to fly it because they didn't want the negative customers saying negative things about it. And my gut reaction was like a punch to the gut on, as a human being, do you want those types of people that have a problem with a rainbow on a flag outside of your business, that God creates in nature a rainbow? Do you want those people in your business anyways? To me, I wouldn't.
And I understand where you're going, and that's just kind of part of the thought process is, oh boy, if I fly this flag, am I going to lose business? And their money is just as green as somebody that is focused on inclusion. So The other thing too is that we all, some people like Pepsi, some people like Coke, right? I mean, we can take a vote kind of thing. What I've noticed in Northern Door in the last 5 years or so is that there are more businesses that are showing that they're part of inclusion, which is positive. It's really annoying when someone, and frankly, since I've had the flag up, the only person that has even opined on it, I actually asked them. So my neighbors haven't said anything. My neighbors probably knew already. And part of who I am is I kind of like to stick it to the man every once in a while. And it also shows my son that it's kind of healthy to kind of stick it to the man as well. And if anyone knows anything about Ephraim, all the buildings have to be white. It's, classic Door County. And so I wanted to shake it up a little bit. But unfortunately, I haven't gotten any response at all.
I'd like to add to that for Amy, because I know how over the years the United Way has grown too, and now you have T-shirts and you've got this beautiful sign in the window, bloom where you're planted, and really using the rainbow colors. Can you talk about how you made that shift, that transition?
Sure. United Way Worldwide, so as a United Way, we're a member of United Way Worldwide. And they came out with the Rainbow Live United shirts probably 10 years ago. And I bought a few, and we had smaller staff then, and just told the staff and the board, hey, we have these shirts if anybody's comfortable wearing them. And a few did, and I will admit I was careful where I wore it. We walk a fine line. All money's green, right? And for us to do the work we need to do in this community, we need everyone who wants to support United Way to support United Way. So at first that was a little tough. Then came 2020, COVID, and we were doing food boxes. That was pretty controversial. Who knew feeding hungry people would be controversial? And then I started wearing my Live United Pride shirt when we were handing out food boxes, because I'm like, well, I'm already getting yelled at, let's see what happens. I got a lot of, hey, where can I get that? Hey, I want one of those. Yes, I had a few people, but they were angry about lots of things. It was COVID. So we, bought more shirts. At the same time, United Way Worldwide decided after the George Floyd incident that we all were required already to have a diversity statement, but they wanted us to have a very strong diversity statement. So we spent a lot of time with our board talking about what our statement would be for Door County and why it was so important that we have that statement. And that was kind of how that transition happened. So we were one of the leaders in the county's DEI work. The 21-week challenge, we hosted 2 of those during 2020 and 2021. We've been part of the county's task force, which is stalled out at the moment, but really trying to be that leader. We've also been asked to have an anti-racism statement in addition to our diversity statement, so making sure that the public understands the difference between those two things and how we address those. When asked, when did United Way become woke? Or when did United Way become political? Our answer really is our work hasn't changed. We're here for everyone in our community to help them in the areas that we work in. It's unfortunately helping people has become political or has become a woke topic. So the transition is a tough one, Cathy. There's still days. I know somebody's going to threaten to pull their donation or will pull their donation. But again, we have to do what's right for everyone in our community.
Well, we applaud you on there. Owen?
I
I just wanted to say something about the flag thing. I understand what you're saying, Andrea, that, you know, how frustrating it is when a business doesn't put up a flag. I'm somebody who always tries to look at the positive spin on everything. Would it be great if every business in Door County flew a flag? Yes, of course. But we should never take away from how special it is, how many people do. And I will say, yes, I've only lived here, like Rebecca said, for a little over 4 years. And I will say, from 2020 to now, how many businesses are flying the flag is a lot more than when I first moved here. And that's thanks to Open Door Pride and to everybody else who has been part of this movement that has kind of sort of blossomed in the last couple of years. We need to highlight those businesses. We need to support those businesses that are flying the flag. If we're just concentrating on people who don't, the people who are going to be like, well, I'm over here and I've been flying the flag. And so I always tell people in our events and stuff to support the businesses that have donated these prizes, that are flying the flags. Go in there, support them, because the reality of it, and I'm a realist as well. And unfortunately, there are businesses, if they would lose a lot of business, because they're unfortunately a generation that is still on this earth that will never change their mind until they die. And so in a lot of those businesses that rely on their money, do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But do I understand? Yes. Take example. I don't know if I should say the business. Okay, so there's a business that's very supportive of what we do. They donate, they on social media they support, but they don't fly the flag. And I've had a conversation with 2 of the owners, and one of them is one of my best friends. And they don't. And I've had good discussions with them. So I understand, and they're like, we are supporting in our way. But like, and the point that this person said was like, but there's literally 4 within a walking distance from our business, you know. And so would I one day hope that business will fly a flag? Of course. However, we need to put our eggs in a basket of support and highlight the ones that are already up. And that will inspire every year another business like yourself to fly a flag.
Thank you for flying that. Thank you, Bill.
Andrea?
And just one more comment too. When I travel, 2 years ago I was in Kentucky, went to Mammoth Cave and was in some pretty scary towns. And when I saw whether it was a sticker in the window or a flag flying, I knew that I could go in there, be myself, and I was accepted and loved. So
I think the biggest issue for our organization when we started was also if you're going to have a business that does fly a flag or a sticker in the window, to make sure that their employees also are supported. Because then, and I think that that's to the point of Amy's, like the training that needs to happen, which is something I think we're all working on. Amy, you have a question?
I do have a question. How did we make Door County more diverse within the local community? Yeah, when I read this, I went, really, I got this one. You know, diversity takes many shapes and forms. So with United Way, the obvious is socioeconomic, our work in the ALICE population, asset limited, income constrained employee. But as we look at people's abilities, hearing loss, people's ability to get in and out of this building even, can somebody comfortably sit in this chair for the 90 minutes that we're here today? So I think we need to look at diverse as a word that isn't so targeted. It's become kind of a negative word, right? We hear lots of committees, groups that have their DEI effort, and now they're changing it to something else because those 3 letters have become a hot button. So we think we need to focus on we're all diverse or flawed was a great word, Mike, that you said, right? We all have a flaw. No one's perfect. And if we can recognize the unique values and perspectives that each person brings, I think that's how we can become a stronger community, but also come to appreciate those diversities that we all bring. So whether that is, you know, your sexual orientation or the fact that, you know, I'm a stubborn German and Belgian, who looks very Swedish today because I am also Swedish and it's summer, so then I turn blonde and tan. But, you know, my temper, man, people want to know where that comes from? Yeah, that's that German and Belgian. And, you know, I think back, you know, my grandparents, right? Your heritage, your ethnicity was something we talked a lot about, and that diversity. I grew up in Pulaski, Wisconsin, so just on the other side of Green Bay. And as I would, you know, wander around the state, where are you from? Pulaski. Oh, you must be Polish. No, I'm not Polish. Well, you can't live in Pulaski if you're not Polish. I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's interesting. But again, that's how we look at diversity in our local community. That assumption that if I went to Pulaski High School, if I lived in Pulaski, I must be Polish. And so I think those are some of those lessons.
Sandy, you want to talk about how with PFLAG there was that experience about diversity or the question of that?
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, in terms of finding words that now have been redefined into a negative, or how do you move forward with that in terms of your work with PFLAG? Have you found recent feelings or experience within the community, the PFLAG community, that feels more inclusive, more diverse?
Oh, certainly. I think more and more people are becoming aware. And in PFLAG, I don't think we've accepted the premise that we have to change what we're talking about. But the DEI community group, different agencies in that, did decide that they needed to make it more acceptable to their board of directors or whatever. I think it's a hard place to give, because if you change the name, people are just gonna change what they don't like, you know. When the county board passed the diversity resolution a couple of years back, they didn't want the word equity included. So it's not in that document, but I don't know how you have diversity and inclusion without equity. You know, it's people don't understand the language, and that's what this art exhibit is demonstrating, that we have so many different languages and each word has so many different possibilities. So whatever we call it, we're talking about the same thing. And I don't know. Did United Way change its stayed with diversity, equity, and inclusion?
It stayed with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do have a committee that we share with the county, our Equity Committee. James sits on that. It's been suggested that I might want to consider changing the name of that. Until I get solid direction that I have to, but again, then that goes to our board. And our board following our policies and statements. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation if the county pushes that with us, because we are partners in that work.
Well, zooming in on the fact that you both have national organizations, and those national organizations, you have local, so the question about diversity in a local community is interesting. How, to what point you almost want to push back and say, no, it's DEI, we're going to keep with these words, because if we keep shifting and shifting and shifting, how do you redefine that? I mean, so in those two instances, James, you work with Hope. I don't know much about the organization. How is that in terms of diversity?
Right, absolutely. So We Are Hope is also the employability hub. And we capitalize ability in that because we do work with people who have all kinds of barriers to employment. In terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's at the core of what we do. We help anyone who has a barrier relating to employment, and we help them regardless of the nature of that barrier. Whether it be, in relation to a language barrier, a race barrier, someone who I know it's a bit controversial, but those who are justice involved. That is another barrier to re-entering the workplace. And it's been shown time and time again that it's very important to get people who have had a previous offense back into the community and integrated. Otherwise, there's a very solid chance of a reoffense simply because they might not have anything else to do, to support themselves even. I just wanted to take a note back to the diversity and how it's kind of a hot button word right now. At the core of it, our community has always been diverse to some degree. I know it's changing a little bit more now based on the way people look sometimes. We have higher populations of people of color, but that doesn't mean that we weren't diverse beforehand. It just means that we're more diverse now. And one of the best ways to foster that diversity is to recognize one another as people first. In the basis of human services, that is the core. You take a person-centered approach first, and then you take a strength-centered approach after.
Owen, when you're looking at the hospitality industry, how does that, and the amount of, now you're starting with the season and tourism coming in, how do you find that in terms of seeing more diversity acceptance?
Well, I would say the place that I'm a manager at is definitely a hub of every walk of life, and I will look around on a summer night and not feel like I'm in Door County. The reality of it is it's predominantly white people up here, and when I look around and I see a family, of all colors and all LGBT couples, it just warms my heart. It's just so exciting to see. I think Door County has grown into more of a destination for people who are LGBT. I've had several customers at the restaurant say that they've heard in bigger cities like Chicago or Milwaukee that this is a very LGBT-friendly place. So the word is out there, and people are coming, and people of color who have felt marginalized in their life. It's hard. Of course, we want to get to that place in the world where we all are just seen as people and not. But when you have been treated in your life as someone judging you just by the way you look, it sticks with you, and it becomes part of who you are. I hope that the kids like today will not grow up with what happened to people like me growing up and being called a burrito boy and spit and then a sissy and then all that stuff. That they will not have to grow up with that. But the sad reality is that there's a little girl, a Mexican girl. I'm good friends with her mom and dad, and she's only 11 or 10, and she had an experience at Gibraltar where her friends like, why do I always have to be the monster when we play? And she's like, well, you're brown, you're uglier. And when I heard that story from my friends, and I thought, oh my God, this doesn't happen anymore, right? Like, this isn't, Door County's so progressive, and we're there, but are we? And that's the thing, it's like, and obviously now, this little girl, who's the sweetest little girl, she had to feel that, and now that's gonna carry on with her. And it's like, so it is easy for us to say, like, yes, we want to get to that point, but unfortunately, the reality is it still happens. And no offense to anyone, because we all go through stuff. White, straight, we all go through stuff. But to have people look at you immediately and assume things because of the color of your skin, that stuff runs deep,
and it does not leave. And so, I kind of going on a tangent, I think, but I hope that we do get to that point where we see people first. I'm a comic, and I make fun of stuff like racism, because that's what we do, right? And, you know, it is hard sometimes to not acknowledge that I know that I'm Filipino, because I've had to do it my entire life. And I'm not like, it's like I said earlier, I've been assumed that I was Mexican my entire life. People speak to me in Spanish all of the time. And to French. So anyways, my point is that like, it's growing to the point in Door County that this is becoming a beacon of diversity. And it's funny that we're talking about this because last night I had to give like an off-the-cuff mini speech because the dancers had to change into another outfit. And I talked about DEI, and out of the blue I was like, okay, what does DEI mean to Door County? And I put it almost in layman terms. Diversity means this: we are all different people, of different sizes and colors of skin and cultures, and that's what makes Door County beautiful, that there is diversity, different people. Then I said equity, made it very simple. We're all equal under the law. We all get the same slice of pie. And then inclusion, we all get a voice. We're all included. We all have equal opportunity to speak out loud and be heard and seen. Anyways, it's something like that. Like I said, I didn't write it, I just shut it. And so I had 3 different parents come up to me afterwards and say, thank you for explaining, because I never really understood. And sometimes all we have to do is talk to people like the kids. And not in a mean way, but explain it in the layman terms that they're like, I think I get it, but no, sometimes they need to really hear it. I know I talked a lot of stuff about that.
That's good. Moving on, Mike, you have a question?
Discomfort of examining different types of oppression and our strength and vulnerability and unity. Is this a question for me?
It's however you want to.
Let me go back to what Owen was saying. Who wrote this question? Yeah, maybe I didn't read it. You know, so I was thinking about this idea that, and I think Mark Twain wrote this about the idea that when you travel, it's the best way that you can combat prejudice, because you see how other people live. And I think what you're talking about, what we're all talking about really for the most part, is this idea of additive. There's nothing that's negative about anything about Pride community. It's additive. It adds to all of our society. All of our endeavors are added when we provide diversity. It's Juneteenth, by the way, which is pretty awesome. You know, that's another avenue to talk about diversity. So that's all I gotta say. I didn't go for the question. what was the question? James?
So it actually wasn't initially a question. It was just a topic that I really wanted to talk about to folks. So it is the discomfort of examining different types of oppression and strength and vulnerability and unity. This is geared not only towards ourselves, but also to our allies and the people in the community who are, facing change, facing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you don't know what it is, those are big scary words. And like you said, Owen, you gotta break it down. You gotta make it make sense. And frankly, change in general can be really scary. But the fact of life is that change is life. And we're going to be facing it one way or the other. There is some significant strength in vulnerability, in recognizing our weaknesses, recognizing what we can't do, because it allows us to focus on what we can do, and it allows us to focus on the things that we should be focusing on. Recognizing the other is another very important part of it. There is some vulnerability in that, saying, you know, rather than just going, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. Yes, you do. It's there, and you can't ignore it. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, but somebody's got to have the vulnerability to actually address it. And why not be the leader and start that conversation?
Go ahead, Cindy.
That's kind of what PFLAG is all about. We get families that are struggling with this new information of change in their family, whether it's a person coming out as transgender or a person coming out as gay, and they're looking for help. So they will find PFLAG, and it's a hard thing for everybody involved. And there's not just one coming out either, because it's a constant effort. Every time you meet a new person, you have to decide if you're going to come out to them. And if you're a parent of a person who is on that spectrum, then you also have to make that decision, because people make comments, and do you just kind of silently go off, or do you make a statement about it? And so we're constantly into change, and it is discomforting, that's for sure. But I think people can find a way to support themselves in doing that and make those steps forward.
And I think that when you find strength and vulnerability, when you can share your vulnerability with someone, that also gives them, by listening, the aspect of being able to say, I see this person being vulnerable. So that's great. We have Jared, you have a question?
So I have the probably easy question. Have you ever experienced discrimination? So depending on how we're doing on time, if we're short on time, the answer is yes. I can go further.
So far so good. We're going to have some time for the wonderful audience to have some questions, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I came out in 1982. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And, you know, that was a very interesting time to be around, because what was it, a year or two later, this other thing came out called AIDS, and you know that brought in a whole different scenario too. There were maybe some like minor incidents of discrimination before then. Once AIDS got more notification or more notice, it was increased some. But I lived in Washington, D.C., largely gay neighborhood, Washington, D.C. So everyone was pretty supportive. I didn't feel it much there. I mean, sometimes. Then in 1986, I made the horrible mistake, sorry Rebecca, of moving to Phoenix, Arizona. And Phoenix in 1986 is nothing like I hear Phoenix is now, but it was not a good place to be. And I was finishing up my degree at Arizona State University and got involved with a very fledgling gay lesbian student union. I mean, we didn't have the LGBTQ back then yet. No, that was still against us, just that we were denied having any university meeting space. We were denied all of the things that you had your Office of Student Affairs, which was where all the other student groups on campus had a mailbox, they had access to a phone. Since 1986, no cell phones yet, no internet. I mean, it's hard to imagine what didn't exist back then that we're so reliant on today. So, an actual landline phone and an actual mail slot were the only ways that people could communicate with you. And we were not allowed to have that. And we got involved we filed a lawsuit against the university to fight for that. It was, I only lasted in Phoenix about a year and a half. I finished my degree and I got the hell out for graduation. But it was so in this whole process of, filing the lawsuit, fighting for recognition of the student union, there's the interesting, the discrimination within our own community there. So we were doing information tables and fundraising events at gay bars and lesbian bars around Phoenix. And it was often me and my boyfriend at the time who were going around and staffing the tables. And we were not allowed into the lesbian bars. And it seems a little shocking now, but at the time it was understandable. I think that safe space was so necessary that even though you were a supporter and you were there because this was a cause that affected us all, you weren't welcome. We could be outside a certain number of feet away from the door, but then got involved with trying to organize the first Phoenix Pride event, which was also very interesting because there were some really passionate people on the committee involved in wanting to create this. Like, let's find a little park up in the mountains where nobody can see us. So I've been living in DC, which had a great Pride Festival. Like, it's not Pride if you hide. So it was very interesting times. And then from there I landed in San Francisco, which you would think there's, at that time, that, 89 to 93 that I lived in San Francisco. And, you just felt like, okay, this is like gay heaven and there's not going to be any kind of discrimination here. But there were incidents of it. I'll have to say that I only experienced one incident since moving to Door County. So we moved here in 2013. We moved here from Minneapolis. The state of Minnesota had approved same-sex marriage in April of that year, but it didn't go into effect until August 1st, and we were moving here August 20th, something was our moving date. So we're like, okay, so somewhere in here, we've got to get married before we leave the state, because we're buying a house, starting this new job, and so all the major life stressors, we got through in 2 weeks. So it was great, but especially having had all of these things happen in our life, we weren't comfortable doing our taxes and wanted to go get our taxes prepared by a professional. And we had a fairly helpful but rather distant tax preparer helping us. It was okay. But then we had to go in and do a follow-up, and that person was not in the office, but the owner of the firm was. And looked at the form and was like, it says you're married. Yeah. Not here, you're not. And we just sat there stunned. We weren't sure how to respond. And, was it better just to say nothing? So we just finished the business as we could, got up and left, and of course it never got back to that firm.
Well, I hope, like what Owen was saying, that we all support the accounting firms and tax preparers and businesses that do support. So I hope you did find somebody.
And that's wonderful that now, because in 2013, 2014, we did not have Open Door Pride, we did not have Northern Door Pride. There wasn't really a place, we knew other gay people in the county, but we'd only been here 9 months. We weren't going to call someone up and say, who should we get to prepare our taxes? We just went to what was close, and that wasn't the right thing. That wasn't the best thing to do.
Well, this has been an amazing discussion. I hope you all appreciated the comments that have been made. It's so hard to do in such a short period of time. There's so many things that were said here that I could just see us making a little series out of this. Just a show of hands, how many people in the panel have been discriminated against? How many people in the audience have been discriminated against? Okay. This is an interesting thought. Final comments from anyone on the panel, and then I would like to open it up to the audience.
So Owen, I was kind of struck with one thing that you said. So now I have a pride flag in front of my house. I'm divorced. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not people start to think that I'm gay, because I'm the only person there, and I know it'll be really kind of neat. So I'll keep everybody posted.
I had somebody say to me, because I'm standing on your porch, does that mean people are going to think I'm gay because I'm next to your flag? I was like, no, don't worry about it. It's not contagious.
I just want to say, like, thank you to everybody for being up here. I know that sometimes it's a scary thing to be put on a panel, and especially the times that we're in right now. And I know there were people that were asked and were afraid to be here. So thank you to everybody that decided to be up here, and thank you for you guys all for coming and attending and being here to support all of us. So thank you.
Anybody else in the panel have final comments before we send a microphone out to the audience? Rebecca?
You start, I'll bring the microphone to you.
I do have one comment. Jarrett, you needed to come to Tucson. To the University of Arizona. Phoenix is a different part of the state.
Phoenix was not my choice. It was the mistake I was living with at the time.
You have a question?
Talk for the birds. Gosh. So my comment is, and I would go back to when I was part of 100 Women, I got to nominate Open Door Pride to get an award from the combined giving of these women. And I started off saying that I'm the mother of 3 sons, and so I never dreamed as they were growing up that I was going to have a son-in-law. But I do. And we are all better because of that. But I always knew my son Andy was gay. We waited for him to tell us, even though his brothers kept saying, Mom, I just want to tell him I love him, I don't care, I know. I said, no, it's his story to tell. We need to just be patient. But when he did, I said to him, I've known forever. There's plenty of love. There's nothing but love for you in my heart, but I'm going to make mistakes. And I'm probably going to say the wrong thing sometime. And you have to come to me with the same openness and tell me and help me to understand when I say the wrong word or use lifestyle or something like that. And so it was very helpful. And I wonder if sometimes people have questions or don't know what to do if they aren't as exposed, and what's a good way to have that kind of conversation with people.
I just had that conversation today, so thank you, Beth. A friend of mine who lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, she's been a friend for 25 years. We met in college in St. Cloud, Minnesota, not a very diverse town at the time in the late 90s, early aughts. And her family's from the northern part of the state, and so she called me today and said that one of her cousin's children, the school yearbook came out, and Grandma got a hold of the yearbook from somebody that she worked with and saw that Colin was listed in the yearbook as Chloe. And Grandma had no idea. And so Grandma was kind of having a fit. And so my friend was just kind of asking me like how to proceed and how to do it, and how her mom and how Grandma should do it. And I said, one thing they can say is, I love you, and ask Chloe what they need and what they want. And so we got into the conversation about pronouns, and so my friend started using they, them pronouns, and she's like, is that okay? And I said, that's perfect, until you have a conversation with Chloe, and Chloe can tell you what their preferred pronouns are. And then we started talking about how cis people can make anybody that has a they, them, she, her, trans, he, him pronouns is by putting it in your salutation in your email. And I did that at work 2 years ago, and my boss called me up and said, hey, I noticed you did this. I'm proud of you. I wish I had the guts to do it. And so I told my friend, I said, by you doing that, and I said, in this, it's Pride Month, it would be a great opportunity for you to do it in your business. And I said, and what it's doing is it's letting people know that may have different pronouns, that you're a safe space as well. And not just that you're saying what it is, it's letting them know, like, hey, it's okay.
Just to go off of the question, one of the most frustrating things to do is to try and understand when people don't understand, right? So like, when someone doesn't understand something, we get frustrated, we get angry, because how can you not understand? And my approach has always been, I've been fighting this fight since high school. I mean, I let a walkout when I was 15 years old. First non-African American to win the Martin Luther King Jr. Award. And I've always made change by talking and not shouting. And I feel like there's this frustration a lot that when people don't get it right away, they don't understand it right away. And especially with an older generation, because obviously through time, you've lived a life and you've said these things for many, many years, and then you're like, you can't say it! Like my Filipino grandmother even used to call one of my friends, is your colored friend coming over? And I'm like, Lola, you can't say that. Like, you can't. and it was this, so my point is that conversation makes change. Shouting and telling does not. When you make people feel like they're dumb because they don't understand, they're not going to change, ever. And I have always been an advocate. Like, if I look at someone and I immediately, okay, you have a checklist of like, you're this age, you're white, you're Republican, and I'm now making assumptions about them, which is, how am I asking you not to make assumptions about me when I'm doing the same thing to you because of X, Y, and Z? Until I have that conversation with you, I have zero room to judge and shout at you or say anything that's going to make you feel like you're less than because you do not understand. And I think I've had this conversation with many people, like, I want to understand, especially with the movement of trans and pronouns and this, I'm like I said, I'm 44, so like the word queer to me took me so many years to understand, to call myself queer or like embrace that word, because that word to me was always I hated when someone called me queer as a kid, that was even worse than the F word to me. And then as a person who is a leader in diversity, equity, inclusion in an LGBT organization, the Q has become such a great and amazing and powerful term now. I had to learn. So it didn't happen overnight. And that's one thing you have to remember. Change does not happen overnight.
Owen, I would also say that change only occurs within. If it doesn't start within, I'm going on a limb because I'm bullshitting you right now. I'm just thinking of the days when Emancipation Proclamation was coming along, and it took individuals with their own set of thoughts and their own rationality to their lives. It was an individual thing on an individual basis, and we got a lot of work to do, and a lot of progress still needs to be made. But it's us as individuals, and if the Pride community embraces not shouting and not just forcing, I will tell you, even with my son, I have a very difficult time. Sometimes I trip up and I don't see that, I say she. And I feel horrible about it. It's a mistake that this is within me. It's not a reflection of them. But I'll keep on trying, Just as I would expect, like with your son, to keep on trying, to help. Everybody needs to kind of help each other. Because I think it really starts in the individual.
So first, I'd like to thank Rebecca for her beautiful art. It's just magical.
And I love the title of Are We Listening? I think that's just really grabs hold of the essence of what we're talking about tonight. And then I'm sitting here feeling very proud of the panel. Just having moved here 10 days ago, I found my family members. So I'm a proud lesbian with 3 grown children, so it's been an interesting journey. And my discrimination is having lost my job that I love, being a guidance counselor in high school. And so my heart goes out to children of all ages in Door County. And one of the things that we could think about and talk about sometime is what I was a part of is having a panel where you tell your story, because you can't argue with somebody's story. You listen and you might not understand, but it is our story. And so to educate teachers about that we don't discriminate a girl of color or a boy that walks different, and to help teachers so that they're awake to what other children, even in Door County, as loving as Gibraltar and other schools appear to be, the problem is still there. And so I would love to see our outreach go to helping teachers and parents, and then that in addition to supporting the kids. Because we know that there's kids that are struggling with sexual orientation and they're hurting. So, but thank you for tonight, it was great.
Welcome to Door County. I know we have the time issue, it's almost 8 o'clock. Are there other questions, or we can keep going? I want to be mindful of time. Never read the back.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for the amazing work you've done in this community over the years.
You're here.
We've been coming to Door County. My husband is from southern Door County, and that's the connection, but we lived in the Twin Cities for, well, we still have a house or a place there. But anyway, we've seen so much change, and that change is all due to all of you for leading the charge. I think that in our history of coming here, and how long have we been coming here now? 40 years, is being out and just being, yourselves in the community and figuring that it's not always going to get the best, elicit the best response, but I'd say in our case, it always has. We have some conservative friends who have a lot of, opinions about things, and interestingly, we've always been very accepted by them. And I think that's really how you change communities and change the world overall, is being yourself, even though it's scary sometimes. But certainly I think has worked for us. So thank you again for everybody being here.
I was trying to whisper it at Owen earlier, but I'll just say it on the microphone now. When you were talking about the Pride Flag Initiative and how some businesses are hesitant because they think they'll lose business, I think it's really important for those of us that pay attention to that and specifically go to businesses because they display the flag, to let them know that you're there because of that, and tell them thank you for not necessarily risking their business, but supporting the community and creating a safe space. Because that space extends to more than just the LGBTQ community. It extends to people that are just looking for a safe space. And so, yeah. Oh, and the other thing was talking about DEI and keeping it in really simple terms. Because not everybody operates in the organizational spaces that you operate in. And I think sometimes when you operate in those spaces and you hear that language constantly, you're very familiar with it, it's hard to remember that some people don't have that same exposure, and that a lot of times it takes all of us as people hearing information 10 or more times before it actually sinks in and you can recall it. So it's important to keep it simple and keep telling us, because it's like, I appreciated that information tonight, so thank you.
One last thing, sorry, Rebecca. You know, it's been, we're clearly in a room here, I think you said it, Mike, there's no trumpet, whatever. Everyone's preaching to the choir here, which is really good, but it's funny, we're talking to each other and we're listening to each other, which is probably one of the more ancient forms of communication, given the fact that we live in such a digital world. And it just, I don't know about you all, but I feel better having heard these stories. And there's this kind of a release that kind of comes out from that. And part of it is it brings back old memories. I lived in San Francisco back in the late 70s. What was interesting, my first advocacy work was with AIDS, was in the Catholic Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, back in 1980 or 81. It was just amazing. So you do find these pockets of friends and advocates, and that's what we've shared tonight. And somehow we got to replicate this model, because it seems to work better than all the other models that we're trying to do at the moment.
Well, I think that we can all take a little bit of pride and a piece of each other with us tonight. Mike, I think you're absolutely right. Even if we're all preaching to the choir, we take a little bit of information back with us and give us a little bit more strength when we talk to that next person or find ourselves in that next situation where we might say, I need to listen. Or maybe no, I need to actually say, diversity is not a bad word. Equity, actually, you can't have diversity, inclusivity without equity. So, but bringing it down to just simple terms without offending somebody by talking about their misunderstanding or lack of education. I want to thank you all. This is beautiful. This is Happy Pride Month. This is amazing what we're all doing here, all of you coming here. We're just gonna keep celebrating. I want to shout out that, well, one, you just had your festival last night. Congratulations for a successful, fun festival. Yes, absolutely. Right on Door County on the 18th, where all three of our organizations are partnering, Open Door Pride, Northern Door Pride, and Right on Door County. A conversation on the 18th. What's the time on that?
It's at 6:30. It's a storytelling night with 3 gay women, storytellers, writers who will be in residence at Right On next week.
Unfortunately, you have a listening here.
Yes.
But it's amazing the work that you're doing. This is an amazing concept reality turned into public conversation. It's brilliant. Congratulations. Thank you all.